Astrology is the myths of the stars and planets, telling the themes and plots of our lives. These stories come to us daily through our satellite, the Moon. She is constantly spinning astro news. Hi, I'm Mary Lynn LeBlanc with Moonwise. Early this morning, 3:50 a.m. Mountain Time to be exact, the planet Saturn appeared to be standing still or stationary to reverse its motion from retrograde to direct. Personally, I don't usually wake up thinking immediately about what the moon or planets are doing today. However, this morning, as I brushed my teeth and fumbled about the house, I found myself thinking about reality as viewed by individuals and how our beliefs alter what we consider the sound, solid, concrete world. Well, that topic is related to the attributes of the planet Saturn and the planet Neptune. And these two bodies are in a very strong connection these days. And Saturn itself happens to be the topic for today's show. And joining me once again, my monthly visiting astrologer lives here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Daniel Fiverson. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's always great to be here.
Well, let's just start out with Saturn, that planet that the ancients thought was, the edge of our universe, because it is the planet that is visible, the last planet as far as those out beyond the Earth and their orbit around the sun is visible with the naked eye, and the rings themselves say much to us about what this planet stands for. What do they bring up for you, Daniel?
Well, it's true. I mean, for the ancients, up until 1781, it was the edge of all that we knew. We had come to the edge of the world. They must have believed that if they somehow traveled past Saturn, they would fall off the edge of the universe. The same way the Earth was flat, the universe must be flat.
Well, there's something about falling off when you do go beyond the hardcore reality that I was thinking of this morning. There is this you feel like you're entering some kind of unlimited space.
In suspension. Yeah, no, I think it's true. Saturn is definitely one of the heavies of the solar system, by reputation. But Saturn brings us mastery, it brings us skills. Saturn is about structure and form, and it creates it patterns, it formats our lives, it formats our consciousness. It really creates the patterns around us, and change is very difficult. We don't respond well to change, and Saturn shows us, actually creates our limitations. It draws the line in the sand, and so it's a hard taskmaster. We don't really like to come up against a wall. We don't like to find that there is a limitation there, that there is somehow an edge to all that we know. We resist it. Saturn is difficult because it requires us to gain mastery and skills and to grow and to mature. And it's not something that is inherent, is actually innate to human nature. We want to stay the same. We don't want to grow. We don't want to mature. We don't want to take responsibility. But the circumstances that Saturn sets up for us clearly teach us to be accountable and to take that responsibility.
And in fact, Saturn does want us to grow, but it wants us to do it in a way that is cognizant of what has been.
Right.
And not in denial of the reality as I would say most of us on the planet have known. Well,
it is that consensus reality, and again, that's difficult if we are attuned to the consensus reality. Then we insert ourselves into all that emotional conflict of the jealousies and the wantings and all the desires that come up as we look around us, and we realize, that, to stay in the game, so to speak, all the things that we're lacking or what everybody else has that we don't have. And and if we're not part of that consensus reality, then Saturn is difficult because it's asking us to form consensus so that we can be in society and be part of everything that's going on and that we can all get along.
One of the things I look at in this regard, especially, is that Saturn has a lot to do with our creating something,
Yes.
going to new territory. Without that principle and that archetype of creator, which is attributed both to the Sun and to Saturn, we don't come up with new ways of being, or even just on a very gross level, new products, etc. And the thing that's remarkable about today with Saturn having, Saturn stationary, as we say, it appears to be standing still. When any planet is in that shape, it's very potent in terms of feeling its energy. And part of that has to do with the fact that this retrograde motion that we've noticed and this direct motion that we've noted, it is very earth related. It's something we see from our perspective. It's not what's actually happening out there. But it's also related to the sun and earth, etc. And there's, in the case of the sun's cycle with Saturn in terms of longitude, this is an annual cycle that actually began. It's interesting in terms of what you were just saying, Daniel, because this cycle began back in November in the sign of Sagittarius, where Saturn is right now, at a degree that has to do with alchemy. Mm-hmm. Has to do with great earth changes. Mm-hmm. And we've certainly seen what I would refer to as examples of what needs to change.
Right.
I mean, there has been so much tumult among people, not just here in the United States, and of course I'm looking at our political scene when I'm saying that, but all over the world there's been conflict that the size of which in some ways is something that for most of us living at this time have never seen on this planet. Some may have when you go back to some of the wars, but even World War I and World War II in some ways didn't have the components that the strife that we're seeing have today. And so there's that energy, but the Sun and Saturn together in their cycle, this when Saturn goes direct after being retrograde is just after they've come through that disseminating phase where there's this recognition of what the cycle was about. Mm-hmm. And so, mm-hmm. We have a lot of people. I obviously hear a lot of what's on KSFR and, the programming like this morning with Richard Wolff and then alternative radio. And then there's things during the week that come up and we have some shows where people call in, and I really get this sense of a certain consciousness emerging about the need to stand up for principles that we believe in about how we should be living on this earth. Right. And I think that's all related to Saturn in a way. Like Saturn, presents the hard reality, but also says to us, you can create a different reality.
Well, I think, yes, I agree with you 100%. Saturn wants to make it real. Saturn is time and space. It is what we term reality. We know that there is no such thing as reality, but yet it's our collective perception of reality, if you would. And Saturn, one of the things about astrology is it's a hologram. We can't we want to pick out the pieces and we want to figure everything out from one little component of it, but it really isn't quite that simple. I think what really is affecting Saturn, the Earth signs themselves want to make something real. They want to build it. They want to construct it. They want to ground it. They want to take it down and make it into something tangible. Well, with the North Node in Virgo, it's adding a tremendous undercurrent, potentials out there to actually find solutions to all the issues that are coming up in a world that are practical and workable. The Earth signs are about practicality and what's workable, what's feasible, what can actually be. It's interesting. Yes, Sun is creativity, Saturn is creativity, but from my perspective, they're kind of different because the Sun's creativity comes from a spiritual center. It's the essence of a person just creating themselves, if you would. It's a life force, just instinctively being. Saturn takes that life force and, in essence, molds it into something that's concrete, that makes it real.
I concur.
Right. So yeah, we've got both working, and it's interesting. The 1 year cycle of Saturn and the Sun builds in increments the 28-year cycle of Saturn itself. So I think that what happens is that each time Saturn comes in contact with the Sun once a year, it brings up the lessons that we're working on in terms of what we've taken responsibility for and what we haven't yet taken responsibility for. And it's okay. One of the things about this Virgo North Node is that we have to kind of let go of this self-guilt that we have, that we did or didn't do something, that somehow we effed up. And that just isn't true. We have to. We are who we are until we're not, I think, is the best way to look at it. And it's okay. We have to accumulate the experiences, whether it's through Saturn or Neptune or the moon, even on a daily basis, that will bring about the experiences and the understanding and the wisdom, the maturity that we get from those experiences that ultimately want us to make any kind of change.
Well, you mentioned that the Sun-Saturn cycle bringing up the lessons that are ripe right now for these times. So Saturn and Sagittarius, what are the lessons?
Truth. It's about truth. It's about finding our truth, and it's about actualizing. Sun is actualization. This is where things actually get actualized and come into being. It's the seed moment, if you would. It's an energetic birth. Saturn makes it a physical birth. Saturn is the involution energy. It's spirit into it's matter. Into spirit. Spirit into matter. I got it backwards. But the point being is that it is about Sagittarius is the search for truth. Jupiter is, but it's a personal truth,
right.
and that's the kicker, because each one of us has a belief system that really propels us through life. I mean, we do everything that we do based on what we believe. It becomes our values, our choices, our the things that we actually do.
Well, I don't disagree with what you just said. But I would say that the lesson is to flush it out a little bit more, is really to examine our own personal beliefs about things. And in many cases, for many individuals, those personal beliefs come from either their family or the culture that they grew up in. And I include with culture the religion that influenced their lives, if they were brought up in a religion.
But Sagittarius is associated with travel. With long distance travel, and what happens when we go to another country? We eat a different kind of food. We see different dress. They have different customs. They have different mannerisms.
Language. We
get contrast to ourselves and to the way that we were raised. So it's an outward learning. It's not really a Mercury Gemini kind of inner analysis or discriminating process. It's an outer exploration, and it's an exposure to other influences, other ideas that weren't necessarily what our parents or our friends or our schools taught us. And it's the exposure to these other ideas and beliefs that brings about the metamorphosis, if you would.
Yeah, it's like the quest for the truth comes by comparison.
Right.
Contrast. You're listening to Moonwise here on KSFR 101.1 FM and maybe streaming on the web at ksfr.org. It's time for the Moon Minute. Stay with us. Daniel and I will be back after this. Welcome back to Moonwise. I'm Mary Lynn LeBlanc with my guest, Daniel Fiverson. Daniel joins me once a month here on Moonwise to talk astrologies. and share his wisdom. And we are talking today about the planet Saturn, which has changed from retrograde motion to stationary, standing still, to go direct. This morning it actually did that station. And there's lots of connections that Saturn is having in the planetary fields these days. One of the main ones is Neptune. Saturn and Neptune have been in what we call a square, a 90-degree angle. It provides a lot of tension, and of course there is a lot of tension in our lives these days. Daniel, how do you look at this square?
Well, Neptune is the collective unconscious. It's the zeitgeist of our society. And it's very interesting because we're in a political year. This is a presidential year, and we're seeing on both sides of the aisle, using a congressional analogy, that the collective unconscious, that the angst, the zeitgeist in the country is a discontent, is of there's this unrest, there's this need, this angst that things have to change. The issue, though, is that the way that things are wanting to be changed are diametrically opposed to each other. But both candidates, and I think Bernie actually was a better example, but both Bernie and Donald Trump captured that zeitgeist. They were totally resonant with what is being felt, across the rank and file of the population of the United States. So that's what Neptune represents. It's what, if Venus is our values, if Venus is the meaning in our lives, again, it's a subjective perspective. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. It's that ultimate meaning. We associate it with God, with the universe, with cosmos, with source, with all that is. Neptune is ultimate truth and ultimate meaning because it's totally inclusive. It doesn't exclude anything, so it has to all be true. So when we have Saturn, coming up in a crisis mode, if you would, to Neptune, we're questioning what's real. Neptune, again, when we look at Neptune and Pisces, and Pisces and Virgo, we have to realize that all these archetypes are polarities. We can't just separate one of them out, pull it out, and it's somehow isolated. It's half of a whole, and it's about perfection. Both Virgo and Pisces, are about perfection. Virgo sees the imperfection in everything. Pisces sees the perfection, sees the wholeness in everything that exists. So it has a tendency, it's our dreams, it's our visions. There's a tendency to move, into unreality. Neptune is not grounded in that Saturnian reality. So here we have Saturn in a square, in a 90-degree, conflict, tension position with real versus unreal. Because it's Sagittarius and it's Pisces, it's about truth and it's about meaning and it's about what's real and it's about what's not real. And our news is filled with this stuff. We're seeing two candidates and they're both getting questioned, up and down the block about everything that they say, everything that they've done, because we're in this truth mode. We're all feeling the tensions and the stresses and the increased, it's like an increased incline in our lives where we're still kind of going uphill with all this stuff. Doesn't seem, we can see the summit up ahead somehow in our dream, but we still have a ways to go. We're just making sure we've got enough water and that, that our roots are going to hold up and we're going to make it to the top in some degree.
Right. And it's funny because Saturn really can't stand the phoniness. Right. I mean, if we were to kind of anthropomorphize these planets,
right.
Can't stand the phoniness. And Neptune really can be a little bit of a trickster sometimes. There's the deception that can come in with that planet. So It's back and forth. But one of the things when we look through history that we see with these two planets is that often Neptune, Saturn represents what has been. And so there's this whole thing of age and time. Mm-hmm. And Neptune can look at that and go, you know what, that is so antiquated, it's got to go. Right. Neptune has this dissolving quality.
Right.
and we've seen that with the present cycle that's coming to it. We're entering its last quarter phase. This cycle began at the end of the 80s, 1980s, and we saw the dissolution of the Berlin Wall. And that's kind of the icon for this cycle, and so everything that's being thrown in our face about our politics, about our political system, how the elections are going, there's the opportunity with this energy synchronicity going on to have what doesn't function anymore leave, get rid of it.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's also the Uranus-Pluto square that's been going on.
That too, yeah. I mean, all these things kind of play in together.
It's a huge
but
mix.
before we get off the air, in terms of the Saturn stationary, you found some interesting comments because Mars has it re-entered Sagittarius, and it's getting closer to Saturn. In this, you can see this in the night sky. And tell us about how you've connected this with Antares, one of the stars out there.
Well, Mars and Saturn are going to conjoin on the 24th at 10 degrees of Sagittarius. The fixed star Antares also is at 10 degrees. The fixed stars move very, very slowly. It's been there it's been at 10 degrees Sagittarius for most of our lifetime. The point being is that I'm not a fixed star expert. I don't claim to be, but Antares is related to both Mars and Jupiter. Its most common attribute seems to be that it creates an ego distortion, where an ego can be inflated to the point of extreme, to the self-destruction of the native. It's the royal star of Scorpio. So we've still got a very strong Scorpio influence going on here throughout this entire Mars-Saturn cycle that's actually beginning, even though it's in Sagittarius. It's got a real Scorpio flavor to it that's going to continue, where Scorpio's not really going away anytime soon. The other thing that's important to note is, Saturn is an outer planet. It takes 28 years to circle the sun. So even though it's moving stationary today and it's going to start to move forward in the next few days, it's not going to be moving very fast initially, and it's going to be pretty much where it is through the end of the month. So it's really going to drill down into this 10-degree Sagittarius point in the sky, which happens to be the same degree of the solar eclipse that's coming up on September 1st, which is going to be at 10 degrees of Virgo. So it's actually planting a seed for this coming eclipse cycle that's being set up. There's a lot of activity in the sky right now, and you talk to anybody and they will all tell you about the intensity in their lives, and there's nobody who's not feeling it on some level. So it's out there, and there's a lot of reasons for it.
All right. Well, that's kind of interesting in terms of where this energy is heading. Because also I want to just throw in even Mars coming into the square with Saturn and Neptune, and how that energy, the Mars cycle with these planets, is about 2 years,
2 years,
and so it's not quite as notable as something different, but it's also saying that something about the way that we take action and what motivates us is shifting.
It's our choices. It's our conscious choices. And with Saturn and Mars in Sagittarius, the retrograde cycle, brought everything right up into, to the forefront of our awareness. We have been examining our choices for the last 4 months, 6 months, whatever period of time that Mars has been retrograde. I don't have the dates in my head. But now with everything moving forward, we're going to begin to act on those realizations and those understandings that we have come to in the past 6 months. All of us in our lives are facing issues and concerns, whether it's health or relationship or economic. We all have stuff going on, and each of us in our own way has come to the realization that the choices that we've been making have not necessarily been working that well for us, that we need to make some different choices, the way we eat, the way we relate, the way that we're approaching our lives. There's so many different ways that this can play out, but it's all about conscious choices. It's about what we're consciously choosing.
Yeah, so coming up later this month when Mars meets up with Saturn, we might feel the energy kind of slow down and this and not feel too motivated to actually go for something. But the slowing down is really meant to say, reserve your energies because pretty soon there's something that can just hit you so strongly that you want to do something and you'll have the energy to do it, as we move towards the end of this year.
New imperatives.
Yeah, new imperatives is a good way of putting it, Daniel. Any last words in these last couple minutes?
Work with it. It's all good. It's here to move us along. We have tremendous potential right now for evolutionary change. Both of these planets, Mars and Saturn, are squaring the nodes. The nodes is our evolutionary path itself. There's a mutable T-square. We'll have a mutable Grand Cross coming up the day after at the last quarter moon. It's hard to get all this information.
More tension.
But it also the mutable cross really opens the portals for change.
That's right.
It kind of greases the slide, if you would. Things are going to move. So expect change and be prepared for change and surrender to it. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the surrender. It's the surrender and acceptance of conflict.
Whoa! If people want to get in touch with you, Daniel, how?
You can reach me through my website, www.4evolutionaryastrology.com. My phone number in New Mexico, 505-930-2748. I'd love to hear from you, feedback.
If you even have some questions about comments that you've heard him make on this show today, give him a call.
Sure.
He might be willing to engage more in a dialogue with you.
And thank you all so much for listening.
Okay. Well, you all have a great week out there. Enjoy the rest of these wonderful, beautiful summer days with a little rain here in Santa Fe. Hopefully there'll be more. And we'll talk to you next week here on KSFR.